Now that the main portions of the app are just about complete, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup to make it look a little nicer, and the cleanup will be done in no particular order. So let's begin. Let's move over to the home screen, and the first thing I want to do is make these buttons down here at the bottom look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to use icons instead of buttons, and we can use the icon library that comes with Expo, or you can install the library. It's called React Native Vector Icons. So we will import material community icons as icon from React Native Vector Icons. And we'll come down to our render method, and instead of these buttons we're going to place an absolutely positioned view on the bottom. So we'll add a view here and give it a style. So this view is going to be position absolute, and it will have a bottom of 0 so that it appears on the bottom. We're also going to add flex 1, flex direction of row, and that should be it for this one. Let's also add a sub view. This one will also say is flex 1, flex direction row, and we'll set the justify content to space between so that we'll have all of our buttons spaced out. Now for the buttons we're going to use icons. The icon library comes with a component also called icon.button, and you give it the name of an icon and an onPress event. So we'll have this button be our add object button. So we'll say onPress equals this dot on add object press, and we'll look up the name later. We'll add another one call for our search button. So this will call this dot on search modal press. And I actually want to add one more button that we haven't implemented yet, which will be called remove object, and that's just going to remove the current object if you don't want to have one on there. So say icon.button, name is blank for now, and the onPress equals this dot on remove object press. And let's go ahead and implement the on remove object press. Let's scroll up, and here's our on add object press, so we'll put it right below that. On remove object press. And we've actually already done the logic for that here, so why don't we copy that, paste it, and instead of doing this we'll just say this dot on remove object press. Alright, we'll save that and refresh. And as you can see, we've got 3 placeholders for icon buttons, but we don't have any actual icons because we left the names blank. They've also got blue backgrounds, which we don't want. So let's go ahead and add a background color of transparent for each of these. I'll copy that and paste it here. And to figure out the icon names, we can go over to the Material Community Icons website. And for add object, I think we'll use a plus sign. So let's search for plus and see if we can find one. There's one, and the name is just called plus. So we'll put plus here. Or we could use the plus box outline potentially. Let's look up minus for the remove. And so we'll add minus for this one. Maybe we'll just use the plain ones. And then for the search, let's look for a magnifying glass. And maybe if we type search, there's a magnifying glass and the name of it is magnify. So we'll type that in and save it and see how it looks. And you can barely see them because they're white, but they should be a little more visible once we've removed these buttons, and we might make them a bit bigger as well. So we can go ahead and delete these buttons now since we've implemented them as icon buttons. Let's save again. And there we have it. We can test these out. I'm going to click the magnifying glass button, and as you can see, our search box comes up. Okay, so let's just go ahead and make these icons a slightly bit larger. So we'll set the size equal to, let's try 30 and see how that looks. And I'll make it about 40, I think would be good. So we'll set all of these to 40. All right. And that looks pretty good. Nice big buttons, should be easy to press. Try it out. Okay, if I click add for add an object, we get our turkey. Perfect. Next, I'm just going to scan through some of the files we made, and I'm going to delete any debugging code that we may have added. I'm also going to add comments. Since I've been dictating the code, I didn't really add any comments as I was going, but it's a good idea to add comments, preferably while you're writing the code, but if you have to, you can go back and add them at the end, as I'm doing now. I usually like to put comments on top of each function explaining what it does. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, so maybe I'll leave them out for this video. So I'm scanning through here. I want to find any time where we do a console.log and we don't actually want to log something. So in this case, we're just logging the current asset state. I'll put a comment here, remove the current object, and then this one will be add the current object. And take out some of these white spaces. This is for rotate the object, render. That all looks good. Okay, so this file looks pretty good. Let me just collapse everything. Okay, and remember we can take this out. One other thing, we can go ahead and delete this because we're no longer using that. We're just only using the searchable Google Poly asset list. I'll save that, and I'll jump into the Google Poly class that we created. There's just some blank lines here that we can remove. This one I will say returns a 3.js object. This one returns the results of the current query. Sets current search parameters and resets member variables. This one returns a query URL based on the given data. Okay, that one looks good. Let's go to Google Poly asset.js, look through this. Don't really see any problems with this one, so we'll keep that same. And then our searchable Google Poly asset list. Look through this real quick. Okay, everything looks pretty good to me in this one, so we'll keep that the same as well. All right, so now let's work on the search page component a little bit and make this look a little bit nicer. I think one thing I want to do is put the cancel button up here to the right of the text input, and maybe let's put a magnifying glass icon next to the search placeholder text. So to get the icon, we need to also import the icon library. So let's import material community icons as icon from React Native vector icons. And we'll scroll down to where we're rendering the search input. And instead of just returning a text input, let's return a view that will contain the text input. So why don't we go ahead and just call this styles.input search container and come down to our style sheet and create search container. And what we want that to do is have a flex of 1, a flex direction of row, and set align items to center so the magnifying glass will line up. And I'm going to collapse these so I can find where we're working at easier. Okay, so inside of this view we're going to add our icon with a name of magnify. Let's give it a color of some kind of gray, so we'll say DDDD. And the size we'll say is 20. And right next to that we're going to take our text input and put it right there. And since these styles are a little long, we'll cut these and instead put styles.search text input. And come down to our style sheet and search text input. Okay, so we'll save that and see how it looks. While that's loading, I'm going to reformat these. Okay, so as we can see, the text input is not stretching all the way to the end like we want it to. So we can fix that by adding flex of 1. And also I want the border to be around both the magnifying glass and the text input. So I'm going to take the border width and put that up here. And I'm going to take the border radius and put that up here as well. And we want to add a little bit of horizontal spacing between the edge of the screen. So on the container, I'll add a margin horizontal of 10. And I'm going to remove the margin horizontal from here so that the search won't be so far away from the magnifying glass. So I'll save that and see how that looks. Okay, it's looking much better. I think we should change the color of the border maybe. So on the container we'll set border color also to have that gray that we've been using. And let's go ahead and move the cancel button up to the right side of the text input as well. So let me collapse more of this stuff. And we're going to grab the cancel button, which I believe is right here. Take this out, and we're going to put it, well, we don't want it to be inside of the border, so we need to put it below the view, which has the border, and then we'll have to wrap all of this inside of another view. And this view should also have a flex of 1 and a flex direction of row. Let's save that and see how it looks. Okay, perfect. And we'll set this to align items center just to be safe. And I think for this one we'll want to put the margin horizontal to 10 and take it away from this one. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. I can test the cancel button. So when I click that, the search page goes away. All right, now let's adjust some of the spacing of the magnifying glass and the search. So I'll come down here, and I think instead of having a padding horizontal on the text input, we'll add the horizontal padding to the icon itself, so that way it spaces out a little bit away from the edge there, and we'll have the same spacing there. So on our icon, I think we can give it a style, and we'll say padding horizontal 10. Okay, it's looking better, although I still think there's too much space here. So let's change this padding horizontal to be padding left of 10 Then we'll have a padding right of, let's just try 3 and see how that looks. And while that's loading, another thing I wanted to change was the no results text. If we don't have any results, I want to make that a little bit bigger and make it italicized. So that's in render current results. And here's the style for our text. Why don't we call this styles.noResults text. And we'll come down here, make a new style called noResults text. And we're going to make it a little bit bigger, so we'll say font size of 18, font style, italic. And why don't we put some padding on the top of about 50 so it has some more space away from the search button. Save that. Oops, I spelled italic wrong. So okay, it's looking pretty good in my opinion. I think one final thing we'll do is we'll make it so that when you press enter on your keyboard, it will automatically perform the search. And I can't remember the name of the property, but I can come over to the documentation, and if we scan through some of these properties, we'll probably find it. I believe it's on submit editing. So this says it's a callback that's called when the text input submit button is pressed. So in our text input up here, we're going to say on submit editing, and we're going to give it the function that happens when search is pressed, which is this.onSearchPress. We'll say this.onSearchPress, and let's test that out. If we wanted, we could also change our keyboard type to be maybe web search, although that's iOS only, or we'll just keep the default. Okay, so if I open this up and I search for dog, and I'm going to press return on the keyboard, and there we have it, it's showing the results. Now one thing I've noticed just now is that this text isn't centered, and I think earlier we tried to make it centered, so let's figure out what's going on there. I'll open up Google Poly Asset and look at our styles. We may just need to add a text align of center to each of these. Let's save it and see if that's the problem. Well, that worked for the first one. Oh, I see, I accidentally put this in the thumbnail class. It should have been in the author name class. Okay, one last time, I'll search for dog, and it looks like all the text is centered. And keep trying to click that. Okay, perfect. All right, and there's a bug I want to fix, which is when we search for something such as dog, we get the results, and if we cancel the search and then bring it back up, the results are no longer there, but we have the load more button. And I believe the problem for this is that we're not correctly initializing our current results array, which is in our state, which you'll find in the constructor. So instead of initializing it to a blank array, I think we should set it to this.props.googlepoly.currentResults. And we'll save that and test it out. So I'll do a search for dog, and I've got my results, cancel, and bring this back up, and the results are there. If I load, let's try loading more. Looks like we have some layout issues for longer strings of text. Okay, I'll cancel that, bring it back up, and there are the full results. And let's try changing our result to duck. There we go, and another layout issue with long text. To fix that layout issue in our Google Poly Assets, we'll come over to the Google Poly Asset component and we'll set a width constraint on our text components. We'll set the width to be the same width as the thumbnail. So here in our display name, we'll set a width of 150, and for author name, also a width of 150. And refresh the app. And we'll do that same search for duck. And if we scroll down, as you can see now, the text is on multiple lines rather than pushing things over.